Like a hell of a nice guy. Jesus Christ. Thank you, John. Thank you, President John. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Vanita. And again, for the meal, Jiminy Frost. These folks back there making coffee real quick, making sure that everything is on. This is an absolutely fantastic crowd here. I come with reinforcements right now, and I brought along two folks that I want to introduce that are part of our central committee. Miss Beth Ann Spires, she's our secretary of the party, and Miss Heather Davidson. Heather Davidson is one of our central committee members. Both of them, by the way, are teachers. One's retired, one's not. So everything I do, everything I write, gets run through them. No, that's wrong grammar. That's no, that's wrong. So I try to do it right, and it's become a game to make sure it's right. Particularly when I'm writing on the board with, we're etching out some kind of work we want to do, or maybe some kind of a plan, or this, that, and the other thing. And I have to tell them, I have to remind them every time that these are not the spelling markers. These markers here are just aspirational. So, but then they go ahead and tell me how to do it. So I appreciate having those folks here right beside me and writing up from Shelby County. So many times it's been confusing to folks when they ask where I'm from. I say, we're from Shelby County. And they'll say, oh, that's up there by Mansfield. I say, no. Then we get into a discussion about the difference between cities and counties, and oh my goodness sakes. But I'm glad to finally be here. This is my first trip to Shelby County, and certainly glad, or Shelby, Ohio. See how it works? See how it works? Yeah. First time to Shelby, Ohio, and I'm certainly glad to be here. I wanted to give you a brief bio. Where I'm from. I'm a farmer. I'm just a farmer. Started farming about 49 years ago. My wife and I, we had a 2-year-old daughter, $2,500 in the bank, and a pickup truck. So we kind of started from there, and that's been built up to about 560 acres, a little over, and my son has another 40 acres. So we've got 600 acres altogether of corn, soybeans, wheat, and cattle. We've got 80 beef cows. We're right in the middle of calving. My son just said that 456, you'll know, 456, you know that cow. She had a calf this morning. We've been having about 3 calves a day right along. For folks that don't know the cattle business, we breed all our cows on one day, artificial. And so they come 3, 5, 10 a day right now. So we breed about the second to last week of July. So in a 9-month gestation period, that puts them right now. And why do we do that? We do that so they're all on grass. We've got 145 acres of permanent pasture, and I want those cows to hit the ground, come out on grass, because that's the most sanitary way to do birth. And then the cow has fresh grass, and if she's eating fresh grass, she's got plenty of milk, and she can feed that calf and keep on going. So that's where we're doing it. Don't worry about the rain; they can handle that. So it's the cowboy that gets wet in the rain. So that's the farming. A little bit more about me. I spent 30 years with USDA. I'm going to walk around. I always feel trapped when I'm up here. I spent 30 years with USDA also. United States Department of Agriculture as a director. I started my career in Paulding County back in '88. I was there for 5 years, and then was lucky to get a job in Mercer County, which is our neighboring county. So I spent the rest of my 30 years and 4 days with USDA. But there's more to the story. And I tell folks this, for folks that haven't heard me, for those that have heard me, I'll say the same thing again. I have a sordid past. And my teacher friends always bug me about sordid. If you say it really quick, a sordid past, okay, they know what you're talking about. I have a sordid past. I grew up in what I believed was a Republican family, okay? My mom and dad weren't political. They weren't overtly political. I never remember having a political sign in my yard. I don't remember going to a rally, anything like that. I was born in '58, so I come of age whenever you come of age. And I don't remember anything like that, but I do know that apparently I was a Republican. Don't know why. But when I became of age where I knew what I thought I wanted, 18, 19, ability to vote, Ronald Reagan came through my town on one of those train stops. And that's where I got started in politics. No, excuse me. That's where I started voting, okay, was Ronald Reagan. And why was that? It was aspirational about diplomacy, statesmanship, personal responsibility, and at the time, free trade. Okay, all of those things, and compassionate conservatism. That was what my foundation was. I ended up getting into the local party. I was asked by a good friend, a Democrat, to help out in the Chad room. Remember the Chad room? You remember that, where we had Chads. Just after the debacle in 2000, okay, in Florida, when Chads were really, really important. So I was the Republican person to watch over. He was the Democrat person to watch over the Chad room. So that's where I got started. Ended up getting asked to be on the Central Committee. Ended up on being Central Committee. Okay, moving forward. Ended up as chair of the party in 2007. That landed me on the Board of Elections. Also as chair for a number of years. I was on the Board of Elections for 12 years under a Republican appointment. And was chair for about 7 years, and stayed on the Central Committee for the Republicans through 2018-19. Okay, so how did we get there? And again, I want to be very clear of what I believed. I also believe this, is that the party of diplomacy, statesmanship, personal responsibility, free trade, compassionate conservatism, no longer exists. It just doesn't exist. Even our legacy Republican friends, fortunately, unfortunately, can't seem to find the gumption to speak up like you folks are speaking up. So let's fast forward a little bit to about 2018. If you remember what was happening, and this is deja vu all over again. In 2018, the beginning of 18, then President Trump applied tariffs to all of our traditional trading partners. First it was washing machines, then it was steel, then it was aluminum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, as a farmer, what are the things that when I purchase something, what's it made out of? Steel and aluminum. So everything got real expensive all of a sudden. All right, so we applied those not only to China, but to our traditional trading partners. And those traditional trading partners retaliated, all right? They retaliated against the United States of America's soft underbelly. And what is that? That's American agriculture. That's American agriculture, just like's happening today. And I lost the value, particularly of my soybean crop, 20% lost that value overnight when China retaliated and they stopped buying our products. This is deja vu all over again. We're right back in the same spot. Okay, right back in the same spot. So I come out swinging. I said, you know what? Unfortunately, I voted for Trump in 2016. And, okay, looking for change, let's just shake it up. And I thought at the time, there's nothing that he can do that our Congress and our institutions couldn't fix. So what's the punchline? Get it on tape. Boy, was I wrong. Our institutions have held. They're damaged, they're chinked, some of them are limping, okay, but I never considered that our Congress would fold like a cheap lawn chair, fold just like that, and would be silent behind not only our Constitution, but would be silent because of one man. So I came out swinging, and I wrote an op-ed. I remember when I was doing it, I was sitting on one of the piece of farm machinery, and I was driving through town, and I was thinking about this, and the longer I sat on that, the madder I got. And I called up my executive director. I'm president of Gateway Arts Council, and I called her up because I was happened to be going by there. And I said, get a computer running. I need to write an op-ed. So she got a computer running, and I don't have access to the passwords. So she got it up and running, got Word on there. And I stopped and I wrote this op-ed. And I said, I spent 30 years at USDA, and I've administered I've administered conservation programs, I've administered disaster programs, I've administered support programs, I've administered loans, all of that, but I never have administered a hush money program. But that wasn't all. That's not what got me thrust onto the national stage. It was the riddle that I wrote within that op-ed. Now, I don't want to get struck down here, so we're in church. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to clean it up. I'll just tell you how it went. I said, the riddle was this. I slept with a billionaire because he said he loved me. When I got up in the morning, I found out that all I got was not what I thought for. Not what I thought was going to happen. When I went to tell the world about it, he offered me money to keep my mouth shut. Who am I? No, I'm not her. I'm the American farmer. And that's exactly what happened to agriculture, is that the president raided the Treasury to the tune of $23 to $28 billion and paid farmers off to keep quiet. That same exact thing is getting ready to happen today. Okay? That kind of thrust me, well, let's just say that the local party just really wasn't real enthused about how one Republican actually had an original thought and said, that's not good. That doesn't help my business. It doesn't help me. It doesn't help agriculture. It doesn't help farmers. That's going to hurt us in the long run. The party, and that's exactly when I found out that the loyalty had shifted not to the Constitution, not to the people, but to one man. This is 2018. One thing led to another. I ended up leaving the party in 2000 at the end of 1819 and hung out as an independent. At that moment, I'd lost, lost 80% of my friends, which no big deal. A couple of good things about that. Number one, I found out that those were friends of proximity.
Yeah, right.
Friends of proximity. Beware of friends of proximity.
Yeah.
Okay. Number two, I saved a hell of a lot of money on Christmas cards. Number three, if you want a friend, there's a lot of good dogs at the shelter. So, no problem if you need a friend. So that wasn't an issue because I knew what I knew what I knew. I knew what was right. I knew what I thought was right. I knew that diplomacy, statesmanship, personal responsibility, compassion, conservatism no longer existed, and I wasn't going to be a part of that. So I left and I hung out as, we call them declares, we'll call them independents. Okay, I'm here. I don't think the word independent shows up in the ORC, right? But
Unaffiliated.
Unaffiliated. I hung out as an unaffiliated, and I thought, how can I make a difference? How can I make a real difference? And I started looking around. I just wasn't quite ready to jump right to the Democratic Party that had structure, that had fundraising ability, that had people like Vanita, that are compassionate, okay, that are all that. So I'm looking around. I had a brief stint and thought that I could run as an independent against Jim Jordan. Okay, Jim Jordan's in my district, by the way. That's my district. He's been my state rep, my state senator, my congressman since he got out of college. He's never had anything. I don't think he's had even. I don't think he's ever even had a lemonade stand. Okay, so he's not done anything except do the will of the funders. So I said, you know what? Maybe I could run as an independent. This was right before COVID. So I make that decision. I start to gather petitions. All right. And by the way, if you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican, if you're a Libertarian, if you're part of the Green Party, if you're maybe even part of the Communist Party, I'm not sure, but if you're one of a recognized party, you need 50 signatures to get on the ballot. As an undeclared, you need 2,500. 2,500 signatures. And what's the rule for our Board of Elections folks? You always get twice. You always get twice the amount because people are they're not going to fib that they're registered, but they're going to tell you they are. They think they are. They want you to think they are, but they may or may not. So you always get twice the amount of signatures. I only ended up with about 3,200, or not 3,200. I ended up with 3,200 signatures, but not enough to meet the 2,500 that were good threshold. So I never got to the ballot. Okay. All right. So I said, okay, now what am I going to do? And lo and behold, over the horizon walks Tim Ryan at that point, January of 2022. And I looked at him, and I listened to him, and I said, you know what? He sounds like me. He wants to be proactive. He wants to be pragmatic. He's compassionate about what he's doing. He wants to take care of people. So, you know what? If he can be a Democrat, I can be a Democrat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then lo and behold, you talk about luck. And I'm going to call this divine intervention. We're going to call it divine intervention. The legislature, the state legislature at the time, Ohio, remember we were arguing over maps in 22.
Right.
Okay? So in 22, we're arguing over maps, and our legislature, controlled by the GOP, they disregarded, 5 times the Supreme Court, disregarded 5 times, put in their own maps, yada, 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 which manifests itself in this. It was that we ended up voting twice for districts. One for congressional districts in May, one for state and house districts in August. You remember the time? Well, how do you change your parties in Ohio? A primary. I walked in there in May. By God, I pulled that Democrat ticket.
Yeah.
And that wasn't it. I walked back in August and I pulled it again. I wasn't only a Democrat once. I was a double Democrat, and I had made the switch and said, this is where I'm going to be. This is the party.
Yeah.
As possibly diverse and maybe defrayed as it can be, which we're going to call that a strength, by the way.
There we go.
It represents the values that I was missing. Diplomacy, statesmanship, personal responsibility, compassion. Okay? That's why I became a Democrat. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. One thing leads to another. The county chair in Shelby County called me up. He said, Chris, he said, thanks for voting. Noticed your voting record. Apparently it was a thing. Small community, 50,000 people in the county. 20,000 some in Sydney. And in Maplewood, Ohio, 300. That's where my village is. He said, I see that you have voted Democrat. You become a Democrat not only once, not only twice. I'd like to have you on Central Committee. Sure, love to. Well, I want to serve. So I ended up on Central Committee, and by the way, the Shelby County Democratic Party was much like many of our rural parties in Ohio. Sparse. I mean, kind. Sparse. Maybe some limited bylaws, just kind of 5, 10 maybe people active and so forth. Not a lot going on. We lost all but one of our state countywide seats. We're holding on with dear life to the recorder. Okay? That's what we have. Many counties are the same way. He decided to leave. Oh. He said, Chris, I think you'd make a great chair. I said, boy, I'm not sure if I'd be accepted with that. I said, let me think about it. I thought about it, and I said, you know what? I think we can make a real difference. I think people are ready to stand up. They're ready to get out from hiding. They're ready to be active. They're ready to hear their voice again. After, and let's be fair, after 20-some years, over 20 years of the Democratic Party in Ohio and nationwide being framed as something that it's not. Okay? It's not this or that. It's about values. It's about family values. It's about taking care of people. It's about taking care of labor. It's about taking care of seniors. It's about protecting Medicare. It's about protecting Social Security. It's about all of those things, but it's been framed as something that it's not, particularly in the Midwest. So here's a chance to do that. So I took the chairmanship, was voted in, and this is the first thing I told folks. I said, this is a 10-year rebuild. No, we got to get ready for the 24 election. I said, we're going to be building this airplane as we fly it. We'll do our best. But this is a 10-year rebuild because it's about rebuilding the brand. It's about rebuilding the values that you have, the values that you all share have somehow been reframed. Okay? And you folks know the story. If you ask, how are Democrats viewed? You can give all these pejoratives, from women's rights to women's health care, all of those words that you've heard. Okay? But that's not what the core of the party is. So we got going. We said, all right, what are we going to do? The first thing we're going to do is to get people out from hiding. Get them to stand up and to be proud to be Democrats. Because in Shelby County, here's the numbers. Not Shelby, Ohio. Shelby County, here's the numbers. 32,000 registered voters. 11,000 Republicans. 1,100 Democrats. That's what we're dealing with in Shelby County. And that is not unlike many of the rural counties. That's the landscape. So you got to stand up. You got to stand up and be proud. So I said, all right, number one, we're going to get people up, get them out from hiding, and let them know that we're Democrats, that there are Democrats among us. And that they're real people. And that they're your neighbors. They're teachers. They're firefighters. They're law enforcement. They're engineers. They're what have you. They're your neighbor. Whatever. So I said, all right, first thing we're going to do is start raising people up through Citizens of the Month and Democrats making Democrats proud. And by the way, we didn't say Democrat of the Month. We said Democrats making Democrats proud, but Citizens of the Month. And we started going out and finding out of these 1,100 people, just people. Tell us your story. What do you do? Oh, I'm a retired teacher, or I worked at the library, or I volunteer at the hospital, or what have you, or I'm a current this or that. All right, let us tell your story. We push out on social media on a monthly basis and continue to lift those people up. And what's that do? It demonstrates to the reader, it demonstrates to who views that as, you know what? I didn't know they were Democrat. These people come back after that and they say, on the street, somebody comes up, hey, I saw you on Facebook, or I saw you in the newspaper, or I saw you whatever. I didn't realize you were a Democrat. Go back to how I got to the party. Tim Ryan demonstrated his values. He demonstrated the way I felt. But I didn't know how to express it because of the way the party had been framed over time, which is not true. So it's up to us to rebuild that. So that's how we're doing that in Shelby County. One person, 1 month at a time. The other thing we did was this. We sent out 550 letters. That's half of that 1,100 people. We went through the Board of Election records and kind of massaged it and found people that I thought were hardcore Democrats. And what was the definition of hardcore Democrat? I just made it up. That if you voted in both the May and the August 22 primary, if you made it to both of those plus the next one, I think you're paying attention.
Yeah.
All right, you're paying attention. So I said, we're going to get these people in a room, send out 550 letters. 10% of them showed up. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I said, we're going to have a platform convention. We're going to determine what our values are so that we can write them down and we can tell people what they are. And we can shout them from the rooftops, advertise them, put them in the newspaper, hand them out at the county fair, what have you. So that's what we did. We got everybody together and we created what our values were. Not what our policy is. Policy's different. So remember this, policy's dynamic. It ebbs and flows, okay? But your values are constant. Your values are core. So we've got those all written down now. We know what they are. If you say, why are you a Democrat? People can now point to one of those. And one of the things I wanted to do was to say, okay, you've got these maybe dozen values there. Somebody asks you why you're a Democrat, pick one, pick two. All right? Pick two. That way you can tell it. Because that was the other thing that I asked folks, was why are you a Democrat? People couldn't answer it. Why are you a Democrat? They may answer it. They may come up with something ethereal, 35,000 foot, oh, liberty and justice and all that kind of stuff. Okay, that's fine, but why are you? Why do you stay in the Democratic Party? People had a heck of a time answering that. So we did it backwards. I said, okay, since you're all silent, tell me why you're not a Republican. Beth Ann was one of the writers, and Heather was one of the writers. We had two things on the board. They couldn't write fast enough. It didn't make any difference. It didn't make any difference if they had the spelling markers or not. They just had to keep writing as fast as possible. I said, all right, now you can take these and find out why you're a Democrat. And they said, why do I need to say that? Why do I need to know it? I said, you need to know it for 3 reasons. There's 3 times you need to know that. One is that the guy, these are all metaphorical, but one is the guy at the Walmart line with his finger in your chest. Your woman probably is not doing that, but once. Putting his finger in your chest and say, why the hell are you a Democrat? You know this guy. And you need to be quick. You need to have an answer. The second time is crazy Uncle Leo clear down at the end of the Thanksgiving line table. You know him. His crazy Uncle Jim down there at the Thanksgiving table, right? Why in the hell are you a Democrat? You need to have an answer. Not just hang your head and stare into your navel. The other time is, God bless, the senior young lady sitting beside you at church. Okay? So why are you a Democrat? Those are 3 things, those are 3 times you need to know why. So I'm going to tell you why I am. And I can do it in 6.06 seconds. Because this is not an elevator speech. You do not get 35 floors. You don't get 3 floors. You don't get the doors closing. You need to know. I'm a Democrat because I wanted to be part of a party that looks for solutions for people, not retribution and revenge against individuals. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. And that's why I ended up in the party. I wanted to look for solutions for people, not retribution and revenge against individuals. So, okay. We've got that taken care of. The next thing is to get people out. Our county hadn't been to the county fair for over 6 years. Actually, I think it was 8. Hadn't had a booth at the county fair for 6 to 8 years. We kind of went back in the records, really didn't know when. But by golly, we're going to go back to the fair.
Yeah.
And we're going to go back to the fair because if you take care of the folks in the rural communities, that's where our bread and butter needs to be. And not only that, at the time, and I still believe this, that women are the key to many of where we need to go to increase our vote share, to increase our voting, to increase folks that come to the party. And by the way, you don't have to be, yes, you don't have to be a Democrat. I don't care if you identify as a Democrat, because the voting booth is private.
Yeah.
It's what you do in the voting booth, not what you pull as a primary, although it would be nice if you do that because it make it easier for you to find. That's an administrative issue. We went back to the fair. And we didn't only go to the fair, we parked our tent right in front of the Junior Fair Livestock.
Right.
Who do you think brings their young person out to feed those rabbits in the morning? It ain't Dad. It's Mom, okay? So we made sure that we were visible there, we were friendly, and we made a difference. But boy, we didn't only just make a difference, we made a splash. Number one, we set up on Sunday, and the first thing out of the bag, I go home to mow hay. This is the last week of July, by the way. I go home to mow hay, I'm mowing hay, Beth Ann calls on the phone, I probably should take that. And I'm driving along, it's an open tractor, I'm trying to talk and rake hay at the same time. She said, we just had an incident in here where we had a young 11-year-old come in and accost one of our workers, one of our persons, with verbally and with a Trump sign, and pushing it into her face and asking her if she was Hispanic or English, just using all those tropes. 11 years old, he didn't get that from another 11-year-old, he got it from home. Doggone well I did. I said, well, go up, and Beth Ann she wasn't a fair animal like me. I said, well, I said, go up to the secretary's office. I said, that's where you need to start. Go up to the secretary's office and fair secretary, and who generally runs the show for all fairs. Go up to the fair secretary and say, we need some help. Goes up, gets the secretary, he was very good, comes down, he said, which one of these boys is getting in trouble? That one right there. He turned white. His grandson. Yeah. Grabbed him by the nape of the neck. You get back to the barn. Of course, he was obviously embarrassed. So we took care of that. Don't let me forget to come back to him. We took care of that. So I go on raking hay. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, oh God, Beth Ann on the phone again. Am I going to get any work done at all? Joe Biden just announced that he wasn't running.
Oh, wow.
Remember, that was that week. That was that day. It was a Sunday. What are we going to do with all these signs? I said, you leave them out.
Yeah.
I said, there's 5,000 people on that fairgrounds. Every one of them's got a camera. Do not get a picture. Do not let a picture of you taking that sign down. It'll show up on the front page of the paper.
Right.
I said, leave them up. We'll take them down at night.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. By the way, by the end of the fair, we go to the 4-H auction. I bought that boy's hog. Yeah. We bought that boy's hog. So, not mine. Oh, you're very kind. So, we took the high ground, bought his hog. I'm not sure we got a thank you note, but that's okay. Somewhere along the line, in the next 10 years, when he's 21 or 28 or whatever he is, it's going to dawn on him somewhere. This is a long-term rebuild. A long-term rebuild. So let's go up to the election. Those are the things that we've done. We go up to the election. Certainly everybody's disappointed. Everybody's disappointed. And I'm thinking, Jiminy Frost, all of these supporters that we've built up, over 100 folks that now in small Shelby County are turning out, they're coming to meetings and they're wanting to help and yada, 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 all of these things. We're building this airplane. What are we going to do with these folks? And my brain is more administrative and mechanical, so I wasn't doing the emotion thing, unfortunately. But those that support me were, and they said, we've got to get people together. We've got to get people together, and they need to talk about what's going on. So we did that, and we end up with the folks and the excitement that you have here in Richland County, the Shelby Dem Club, all of that. We experienced the same thing in Shelby County. Okay, the same thing. So so now we've got plenty of folks. What's my guidance? What are we going to start doing? Okay? First off, I got kind of a laundry list here. Be wary, be careful of silver bullets. There's no silver bullet here. This is not a cartoon where somebody is going to pull a lever and all of our MAGA friends are going to drop through the floor. Okay?
I'm all for it.
Yeah. Although you're all for it, right? All right. What we need, in my view, is an all of the above strategy. We're working on rebuilding local infrastructure. We've got more Central Committee members to get. I don't know where you're at, Vanita, on yours. We've got open seats on Central Committee. We need more people. Beth Ann's working on that. Stop blame. This is hard. The next few of these is hard. Stop blaming voters. It's hard. You just want to jump. You want to jump, okay? Focus on this. The MAGA folks, the hat folks, push that out of your mind, all right? Focus where the fertile soil is. That's in folks that are more independent-minded. I don't call them independents because all that means in an independent thing is that they haven't participated in the primary. It doesn't mean they're independent thinkers. It may or may not, but it's correlation is not causation. In other words, just because it appears to be independent doesn't mean they are, all right? So, but we have to make it easy, we have to make it safe for those voters to come to the voting box. You don't have to come to a Democrat rally. You don't have to show yourself as a Democrat, even though we did that at the fairgrounds. They started to come in by the fourth day. They were coming in because they go by. It was funny. They would go by. You'd get the straight persons. Okay, that was one person. Then you get the side eyes. They'd look, And then there was another person, they'd walk by and they would gesture with their hands. But the other two were Democrats, and by the fourth day they would come into because why? Because we made it safe. We made it safe for them to stand up and say, I'm a Democrat, I'm with like-minded friends, it's apparently safe in the pool here, and they would come in. And they end up putting their name on a chart, and putting their name down to help. So, same thing here. We need to make it safe. We need to start listening to the voters, what they want. The Democrat Party has had, in my view, difficulty starting at the wrong place on messages. Okay, you can start here, you can start here, you can start here, you can start here. Start with messages that support everybody. Okay? If we're going to lead with messages that only support a few, even though we have to take care of the underserved, that is part of our foundation. We have to take care of the underserved. We can't take care of the underserved if we lose. You got to win. And the way to win is to start at issues that affect everybody, whether it's the economy, whether it's security, whether it's price of housing, whether it's price of health care, whether it's taking care of Social Security, whether it's all of those things, that raises all boats. And if we stay strong there, we'll make sure we take care of the underserved population as well. But doing it from backwards, we've learned that loses elections. It's the right thing to do, but it's not going to help if you don't win. You have to win elections to take care of everybody. On an airplane, what happens? Put your oxygen mask on first before that of a young child. Why is that? Because if you're not strong, you can't save the most important commodity on that airplane, which is a young child. So beware of that. Finally, when we're in the business of not blaming voters, we say, why Why don't you stand up and vote for saving your democracy? Why won't you help us for that? Well, can't you see what's going on? And this speaks to what I just said about making sure that we're focusing on the economy, making sure we're focusing on issues that support everybody. And it's like this. It's hard for folks to defend their democracy when their wallet and or their belly doesn't meet their expectation. That's what we saw in the last election. What about democracy? What about this? Democracy's under attack. They felt attacked economically. They didn't feel good about it. It was hard for them to defend democracy when their belly and their wallet was not meeting their expectation. So those are the things, in my view, that we need to consider. Those are the things that we're going to consider in Shelby County. And finally, the small acts. The small acts of writing. Writing a letter to the editors. Writing in your local newspaper. Writing to your representative. Rallies. Protest. Making your voice heard. That's part of the all of the above strategy that we need in the party. That's what we're doing in Shelby County. People ask why do I stand up? Why do I speak? Why do I try to move the narrative a little bit and maybe make you uncomfortable, what have you? I got 2 grandsons, 6 and 3. There's going to be a time when they come, 10 years, 12 years from now, this period is going to be called something. It's going to be called something. I just hope it isn't called the
Dark age.
that. I just hope he's taking everything else. I hope he doesn't take the naming rights either. But this period is going to be called something. And they're going to come to me and they're going to say, and the same thing's going to happen to all of you at some time. What were you doing, Grandpa, during this time? What were you doing? And I'm not going to say that I hid behind a party, that I hid under a bushel, that I hid in the barn, that I just figured it would all go away and somebody else like Vanita could fix it. I'm going to say I stood up. I'm going to say I stood up and I did what I could. I spoke out. I spoke out. You know, it goes like this. How many folks? I'm a Broadway kind of guy, and in Ragtime, if you remember the piece Ragtime, there's a song in there that says "Make them hear you." Make them hear you. Powerful song, sung by an African American ragtime piano player, and it was just before in the show in the musical, just before he was killed by police, and he encouraged the listeners to struggle against injustice and emphasize their voice, and their words. And part of that goes like this. Go out and tell your story. Let it echo far and wide. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. When justice was our battle and justice was denied, make them hear you. Make them hear you. And say to those who blame us for the way we chose to fight, sometimes there are battles that are more than black and white. And I could not put down my sword when justice was my right. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. Thank you.